I inherited 6,200 acres of private marshland that has been in my family for generations. The wetlands are home to hundreds of migratory birds and protected wildlife habitats. My grandfather spent decades preserving this beautiful ecosystem. I promise to continue protecting every acre of it. After moving onto the property, I noticed several hunting boats crossing my private waterways. At first, I assumed they were lost or unfamiliar with the property lines. But what I discovered was far more surprising. They believed the marsh belonged to their HOA community. The HOA president informed me that residents had been duck hunting here for years. According to her, the marsh was considered a shared recreational area for the neighborhood. Apparently, they had created their own hunting permits. There was only one problem. I owned every acre of it. I immediately retrieved the original property deeds and conservation agreements. The documents clearly established my family's ownership dating back decades. There was never any legal connection to the HOA community. Their assumptions didn't match the official records. My marshland also participates in wildlife conservation programs designed to protect migratory bird populations. Responsible land management has always been our family's priority. Preserving nature matters far more than convenience. That responsibility now belonged to me. Several HOA members had even constructed temporary hunting blinds near protected wetland areas. They genuinely believed they had permission to use the property. Unfortunately, that permission was never mine to give because it was never requested. Boundaries exist for a reason. I organized an informational meeting to explain the property's legal status to nearby residents. Many homeowners were shocked to learn they had been misinformed for years. Transparency immediately changed the conversation. Facts tend to do that. Wildlife experts inspected the marsh and documented several environmentally sensitive areas. They recommended additional preservation efforts moving forward. Conservation always comes before recreation. Protecting the ecosystem remained my highest priority. The HOA board refused to believe that private wetlands could exist beside their community. They insisted the marsh should remain open to residents. Legal ownership, however, isn't determined by popular opinion. County records would soon settle the matter. That was the moment I realized this wasn't simply about duck hunting. It was about protecting generations of conservation work and private property rights. The real fight was only beginning, and I was prepared for it. Early one Saturday morning, I counted nearly 15 HOA hunting boats entering my marsh. Residents were unloading decoys and preparing for duck season as if they owned the property. No one had requested permission or verified the legal boundaries. The situation was becoming impossible to ignore. I politely approached the hunters and explained that they were standing on private land. Most were genuinely surprised by the news. They had been told the marsh belonged to the HOA's recreational district. Years of misinformation had created an unnecessary conflict. Several homeowners showed me laminated hunting permits issued by the HOA board. Unfortunately, private property permits aren't created by neighborhood committees. Ownership still belongs to the legal title holder. The documents had no legal authority whatsoever. I invited county officials to inspect the property's legal boundaries and conservation easements. Every document confirmed the same thing. My family owned the entire marshland. The HOA's claims simply didn't exist in public records. Facts are difficult to argue with. Wildlife conservation officers documented several nesting areas near the hunting zones. They recommended expanding protected buffer areas around sensitive habitats. Preservation must always remain a priority. The marsh was far more than recreational land. The HOA president demanded that I allow residents to continue hunting as a community tradition. She argued that homeowners have been enjoying the marsh for years. I respectfully explained that traditions don't override property rights. Ownership still matters. Local historians discovered that my grandfather purchased the wetlands nearly 60 years ago. The HOA community wasn't even built until decades later. Their recreational claims fell apart almost immediately. History told a very different story. Residents began questioning why the HOA never verified ownership before issuing hunting permits. Many felt they had been misled for years. Community meetings became increasingly uncomfortable for the board. Accountability had finally arrived. I decided to install clearly visible private property signs throughout the waterways. Every sign included conservation information and legal access requirements. Education often prevents future misunderstandings. Respect begins with clear communication. The county officially recognized the wetlands as privately managed conservation property. That designation protected both the wildlife and the land itself. Legal ownership had never been in question. It simply needed to be understood. Local newspapers published the story of the HOA's unauthorized hunting permits. Residents throughout the county were fascinated by the unusual property dispute. The wetlands suddenly became a symbol of responsible stewardship. Conservation gained widespread support. Several homeowners personally apologized after learning the truth about the marsh. Many offered their support for future conservation efforts. Respect replaced misunderstanding almost immediately. Honest conversations made all the difference. Together, we organized educational wildlife tours focused on bird conservation and wetland preservation. Residents discovered that appreciating nature doesn't always require hunting it. The marsh became an important community learning resource. Everyone benefited from the experience. Looking across the wetlands at sunset, I remember the promise I made to my grandfather. Protecting this land remains one of the greatest responsibilities of my life. Conservation isn't simply ownership, it's stewardship for future generations. The HOA officially discontinued all recreational permits involving my property. Their hunting program quietly came to an end. Private property rights had once again prevailed. The matter was finally resolved. Wildlife populations throughout the marsh continued thriving under careful management. Migratory birds returned each season in remarkable numbers. Nature rewards those who protect it. The wetlands had never looked better. What began as a property dispute ultimately strengthened conservation efforts throughout the community. Residents developed a new appreciation for wetland ecosystems and private land stewardship. Education proved far more valuable than conflict. That's a victory worth celebrating. Today, my family's 6,200-acre marsh remains exactly as my grandfather intended, protected and thriving. Every acre continues serving both wildlife and conservation goals. Some places are meant to be preserved. This land is one of them. Every morning, I enjoy watching the sunrise across the marsh while listening to migratory birds overhead. Peace returned once the misunderstanding was resolved. Responsible stewardship will always matter more than convenience. That's a lesson worth remembering. Today, the marsh remains private, protected, and thriving under responsible conservation management. The HOA learned that private property cannot become community land simply because people enjoy using it. Respecting ownership protects both people and nature. And that's exactly how the story ends.